Welcome to the second episode of Weed Over 40. I'm Terry Ann Boyer, this is Scott Cowan, and this is Joan Bateman.
Hi.
Today, our topic for conversation is going to be cannabis and migraines. Scott, I'm going to let you tell your story.
A very painful subject.
Yes, a painful subject. About 18 years ago, I was involved in an automobile accident. I was driving a Volkswagen Jetta at the time. A 350 dually truck ran into my driver's door, and when I regained consciousness and started to spit out chips of teeth and so on, the ambulance came. I went to the hospital and I was diagnosed with a closed head injury, quite severe. And as it evolved over the next coming couple of years, I suffered migraines, I would say anywhere from very uncomfortable to debilitating, lights out, in bed, writhing in pain kind of migraine. And I endured that for at least 2 or 3 years. Since that time lapsed, I then probably have a headache 3 to 5 days out of a week. Sometimes even as recent as about 6 months ago, I had to go to emergency to get a shot of morphine.
And I mean, he gets migraines. I don't get migraines. I get headaches. And you, I don't know, do you get migraines?
I've had migraines.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So when I started using cannabis, my migraines left. So I mean, I'm not going to tell my story on that, but I understand
Well, you know,
his story on that.
Well, the whole thing is that my wife talked me into trying cannabis, and I was a staunch anti-cannabis. The one thing my parents did well is injected into my brain that drugs and so on are taboo.
Yes.
And we
Which
talked
is a stigma which we really have to get over.
And the thing is that cannabis is a plant, and it's a substance like any other, and we don't have a problem.
Actually, it's not a substance like any other. I don't mean to disagree, but it's absolutely not like any other, because everything else that we have for substances,
created.
No, it doesn't do as much as what we are finding that cannabis and its constituents do.
Exactly.
Like
And it's because of the endocannabinoid system within the plant and within our body. And we were just talking, why don't you kind of flesh that out?
Well, it's kind of funny because I'm reading about, I was trying to figure out this endocannabinoid thing. There was just a question I've had for a long time. Like, I understand all of this, but at the same time, there was things that I was like, well, I don't get that. So the thing I didn't get was that we have an endocannabinoid system within our body, but it's called endocannabinoid cannabis. But for some reason, we have something that's already there, and I couldn't figure out where that came from. So anyway, I looked up the origins of the word. The origins of the word came in regards to they did an initial study. Somebody was doing a study a long time ago on rats, and they were trying to figure out how the THC worked within the rats, just to kind of bring it down to small points. And in that, they figured out that the way that the THC was working in the rat was through a system that was throughout this rat's body. And so they labeled it the endocannabinoid system. And what it is a system of receptor sites, like within our brains and within everything in our body, except for it's not really in our lungs or our heart. It's in our central nervous system, and it's in our immune system, in our glandular system, our hormonal system, and it's all throughout our body, and it's at the gateways to all of the other systems. And so what it does is it has like little keys and locks, and basically they fit together, so we have substances that go in, turn the key on and turn the key off. And that's kind of how the system works in a nutshell.
So what you're
I like
saying,
the key on and key off analogy. That makes it easier to see visually in your mind.
but what you're saying is the reason that cannabis worked for me and cured my headaches is because I'm a lot like a rat.
No, we're talking.
Okay, well, carry on.
But he is kind of. No, I'm just
Oh, by the way, we're not doctors and lawyers here, so don't sue
dirty
us. We're
rat.
not prescribing or diagnosing anything.
Yes, we've said this before, but maybe we should quickly say the legalese before I get too much in it.
So we're here to
Don't sue me.
Yeah, don't sue us, right? We're not physicians. If you wish to explore this as an option for yourself, find a doctor in your area that is in tune with using cannabis and explore it that way, right? We're here for informational purposes only.
Yeah, you know, just like anything else, if your doctor prescribes something, I encourage you to look it up and really know what you're talking about or what they're giving you anyway, because
You
it
have
doesn't
to
matter what it
advocate for
is, you
yourself.
have to be your own advocate nowadays,
Well,
because
and just for
there's just so
reference,
much.
my doctor prescribed Demerol at the beginning and then morphine, and I prefer to vape.
Right.
So,
So you advocated
Because
for yourself, you found
I-
out what you
I
needed,
don't-
and then you.
I don't walk around half loopy when I'm doing my job if I vape a little bit to get rid of the edge off my headache.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm dropping some Percocet, I wouldn't want to be working around heavy machinery.
Right,
Or
well,
driving.
there's a difference between using cannabis responsibly. Oh my goodness, did you know that really could be a concept?
Energetically,
the stigma is that we're all just a bunch of stoners if we use it, right?
Right,
And
but
that's
no,
all
you
now.
can use it responsibly. Microdosing for medical purposes is a thing,
Yes.
right?
yeah,
And
we're
so-
not here to encourage you to get high on the weekend.
Although, if you want to use it
Recreationally,
recreationally,
that's
that's
a whole
fine
nother
too.
topic.
Well, we can clear that up with the Prime Minister. I mean, that's kind of
Soon
his,
it's happening.
that's what he likes to do in his off time, so,
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, when you say microdosing, that's the really interesting thing. This is something that I find extremely interesting about cannabis and cannabinoids. And we actually, the system we have creates it within our body, actually makes its own cannabinoids. We have two different cannabinoids basically that our body makes.
CB1 and CB2.
So those are actually the receptor sites. CB1 and CB2 are the receptor sites
Okay.
within the endocannabinoid system. What the two cannabinoids are that we actually create in our bodies are, they're long names, but one is anandamine and another one is AEA, which is, that's the anandamine, sorry, or a 2AG. So 2AG and AEA are the two that we make within our bodies. And they're very similar to THC and CBD. So THC and CBD work very similar, and they fit into the locks and
Unlock the
keys
keys.
the same way that the ones that we have are made,
Right.
are within our bodies. So that's why it's so interesting. But there's also so many other little things that work along with that system, and that includes things called terpenes,
Right.
which there's like, I think, 400 different terpenes. They haven't even,
Identified
identified all of them yet. But all of these terpenes, and they're the things. Terpenes are the things that are in aromatherapy. Terpenes are the things that everybody says. Like lavender will make you sleepy, and chamomile. All of not chamomile, but things like in wine. Like when we talk about wine, we talk about the oaky or the smells. All of those things are terpenes, and they work differently along with all the receptor sites and the keys. So if you have ones that like those terpenes that will sit in those same spots, they take up part of that receptor site. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And the more often you smoke, the more your body creates these.
Right. This is really interesting because he, at first, I gave him some and said, here, try this for your
She would hit
headache.
that vape like 3 or 4 times and say, that's enough for me.
I can't do it.
And I'm
hardly any.
at 10 or 12, and she says, how do you feel? And I said, I don't feel anything.
And
Nothing.
Which is very
Which,
strange.
all of the sudden, I had this great catharsis. I felt nothing.
You didn't
For the
recognize
first
that
time
you,
in years, I was pain-free. Completely.
and you didn't recognize that right away.
I've become used to being in pain.
Right.
Now, there are people who actually do not feel anything at all. I know you said it's strange, but it's not. So sometimes people will be like, it doesn't do anything for me.
And you do hear people say that.
Yeah, and I mean, at first that's what was going on with him, but the thing he noticed is that he wasn't in pain. But he
Right.
still wasn't feeling any psychoactive effects like you would with THC.
Yeah, so
Now,
I
the
could have
stuff-
got out and did any work and as per normal.
The strain that I gave him was one that had, a balance. So there was THC and CBD. Now, CBD is the one that doesn't really cause any psychoactive effects. It's more working on the other receptors in our body, like anti-inflammatory, that kind of thing. And I mean, lots of other things too. But it's not the psychoactive effects like THC. There's a whole lot of other ones that are there, CBGs, there's that we could get into. But the basic of it all is that it doesn't have any psychoactive effects. So he was feeling the effects of the CBD, but not the THC.
Well, and also the CBD will counteract the effects of THC.
Exactly,
Depending on your ratio.
right.
That's a whole nother formula that we'll get into on another episode.
But it's interesting to know in relation
Right.
to migraines,
Right.
right?
But
So-
it's important for the novice to understand. I was approaching it when you introduced me to this, is that you wanted me to smoke dope and I would get high and then I wouldn't have a headache. And that is not
And he
what
really
this
was.
is about.
He was like
Right.
actually angry
It's
with you.
nothing.
He's like,
And you've got 15 years of background in psychological training and working in the Alberta Hospital, Ponoka. So it's not like you haven't seen this kind of thing before.
correct, yeah.
So the bottom line is I was expecting that somebody would, or you were trying to talk me into drug use.
Well, and it's interesting, in all that experience that I've had at the hospital, I mean, we were telling people that that was absolutely an awful thing for them to be doing, that they were wrecking their programs, their mental health programs, by infusing themselves with a drug, right? I mean, that's the
And you were
stigma.
probably teaching them that this was the big, like.
That was part of it.
You were following the whole cultural protocol that we had at that time, reefer madness, and like it was a gateway drug and downhill, slippery slope down
Exactly.
and everything.
And it's a psychoactive drug, so they were messing with their psyche, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it was something
And all
that
of
we
the
were,
drugs that are in use today are the same drugs they use like 10, 20, 30, 40
as far
years
as
ago.
medical,
For-
yeah. I mean,
in psychological.
a lot of them are.
Well, in the fact, what people need to understand is you've had 15 years of extensive experience at Alberta Hospital, Ponoka, in the psych wards and so on. So she does know a little bit about what she's talking about in this regard. And when she began to say to me, you need to try this, I was very resistant because it smacked in my mind of, you just need to go and get high.
Right.
And again, we touched on this earlier, but that is absolutely not what we're talking about
Right.
whatsoever. And
I just want to get back to the fact that we think that it's not going to, that it didn't work with you otherwise, like you weren't getting the
Right.
psychoactive effects.
well, and the thing is like I was pain-free, and I didn't have any feeling of being high or anything of that
Right.
nature. So I could have went out and went right back to work, and
Which
and
is
especially if I was like operating heavy machinery, or like say I'm in the oil field and other people's lives are dependent on me not making a mistake. I would much rather be working with somebody that had just had a couple of vapes than I would somebody on Percocet.
However, it's affecting you that way, and may not affect somebody else the same. That's the legal issue that we're getting into, right?
Yeah, so that's part of what's gonna be, the employers are gonna have to look at this with their employees in the workplace. And I think there's going to be different industry protocols. And not everybody reacts the same way. You can have more than I can. I can't drive if I've
Right,
had
I
3 or
could
4.
never,
Right.
how much he took before his headache was gone was, I would have been flat out for the next day, or that night.
But my point is, if I go and have 2 or 3 cocktails, I'm at my limit.
Right.
Somebody else could have a dozen and you'd never know they had a drink. So this is the dichotomy in the workplace. How much is too much? How much is too much for you? How much is too much for me?
And how are they gonna handle that? I mean, you've done some research on
Yeah,
that,
so they don't know. I think the short answer to that is they don't know,
Yeah.
right? The long answer is they are trying to come up with a baseline like there is for alcohol, right? 0.05 for alcohol currently,
Right.
right? Different numbers are being tossed around for THC.
But my point is though, it's very easy to say even zero tolerance, be it for alcohol or for THC, but they don't say you can't pop a pain pill.
They do not, right?
Exactly.
And yes, I firmly believe that somebody is probably more affected, impacted, stoned, if you will, on 2 Percocet or 2 T4s than they are if they've had 2 or 3 puffs off a vaporizer of a mid to low THC product.
And that is on a sliding scale as well. I mean, and that's because of the fact that our endocannabinoid system can be dysfunctional. So some people can have a system that really doesn't work at all to begin with. And if they start using a CBD oil or a THC blend with CBD, what starts to happen, our body starts to respond and it says, oh, what is this thing in my body? And it starts to actually recreate or continue to create or expand their endocannabinoid system. Our bodies are amazing, right?
And then what
So,
happens?
so then, as you take a little bit of oil and you do it for a little while, or you take a little THC or both, your body starts to respond in the way that it adds to the receptor sites. It starts to expand its system. So now, as you start imbibing, you realize that now you may actually get high after a little bit. Like, he may not need 15 or 16 puffs on the vaporizer. He may only need a couple.
Right.
But that's because our
Because-
system responds to that whole, which is amazing to me.
He's healing himself.
That's the cool thing. It's very homeostatic, right? So the whole point of the endocannabinoid system is to make your body back into a balance. To take something that is out of balance, whether it's hormonal, anti-inflammatory, pain, and even as much as like painful memories. It can actually work on the memory system. So people with PTSD, all of those things. I was just floored when I started reading the research on that. It can actually work to remove memories. That's because our bodies respond to memories physiologically, and we don't really understand
And
that.
yet, there's research to show that that it's beneficial to early stages of Alzheimer's or
Correct.
slowing down the progression of Alzheimer's because it will help with the memories. So I think that it
It
knows
brings
how
it
to
back
work.
into balance.
Right.
Exactly. And it does that through the whole rest of our systems. Our systems are very much interconnected, just like everything else in the world, right? So, I mean, our bodies are a little miniature system of the world. Things are connected. And if you can bring them back into connection and bring them back into stability so that the balance is there, then things work properly. Anytime something is out of balance, something else is not going to work. So it's incredible to me how many different things these compounds will
But
do.
and what, now, before this sounds too scientific.
It's
the
not
way
a
you were-
panacea.
The way you described it to me, it just meant that cannabis affected so many different areas and reactivated and brought into balance so many areas that the body itself would then begin to heal all these numerous ailments and diseases.
And that just sounds a little bit like, I'm a medical person, so that sounds a little bit to me like a panacea, snake oil, right? And it's not that. What it is it's something that is recreating something that our body already has, like your heart and your lungs and all those things. They work all on their own. We don't think to ourselves,
I
I'm
need to
gonna breathe or
Right.
whatever. And that's the same idea behind this. It's happening anyway. And so there's something that's bringing everything back into balance, and it's throughout your entire body, just like the lymph system. There's little lymph nodes all over your body helping with your immune system. Well, these work along with that. It helps with your immune system.
Well, and isn't that what we're always looking for when we're looking for things that are going to heal us, right? Especially when we're looking towards a more natural product, not a man-made pharmaceutical product.
Mhm.
We always use the terminology to heal us, to bring us back into balance.
Correct, yeah. And it's interesting because they have created synthetic versions of THC.
They don't work as well.
No, exactly. They can't make them work as well. And then there's people that say that, you can just use CBD, and I'm not one of those people that believes that. I think that there is what's called an entourage effect. That's a word that's being bounced around, or a term that's been bounced around. And the entourage effect means that it works with the terpenes, with the
You need to have the
enzymes.
full profile of
Exactly.
the THC and the CBD.
It's like taking apart something we really fully don't know yet.
Right.
It is, right?
Well, and what's going to happen as they are spending more money on studies, we're going to be able to clearly identify which strain works for which ailment.
Yeah.
And we
that's
haven't been able to
super
do the
interesting.
studies yet because it hasn't been legal. It's been a
But-
catch-22.
But
right?
in the since 2014 or something, I think it was, I read a study, it's in my mound of papers here. But it's literally to the point now where there's 2 studies being done every hour.
Because it's becoming more accepted, we're on the
Yeah.
verge of legalization, medical marijuana is legalized, so
Which is
therefore,
exciting.
the research has been able to grow exponentially because
Right.
it's not illegal anymore.
Yeah.
Right, and so they can access the money, the tools, the personnel to do these studies.
Exactly.
And keep
Which is so
and keep
exciting.
in mind that it takes mountains of money to get this all cut and dried and so-called scientifically or medically, in place. Whereas what's been happening over the decades is that the illicit users have been benefiting by
Yes.
virtue of just using the stuff. And this is why we know so many different problems are affected, and we're not gonna use the word cure because God knows I could get sued for
Yeah,
that.
you definitely, well, it's not a cure either,
But it helps. I know that my headaches are better,
right.
and I don't care.
Well, and you know, your
And you
pain
know.
has
And my
been
pain is
cured.
better, yes.
And we could give you hundreds of stories that we've
Yeah.
come across of people in the same position. We just can't yet identify which strain works on which ailment at what time.
And
the
that will
best.
come,
And
right? Gonna-
that's coming.
Rapidly, I think, because of opening up with legalization.
Yeah, and it's, the thing is there's gonna be so much information to disseminate and to go through, because like I said, there's so many different studies being done now all over the place. And that's all over the world, I mean, we're talking China, Italy, Spain.
And I do,
you
and
know,
I
all
think
of
we
those
should
places.
say that there are a lot of people out there that are making exaggerated claims and giving people false hope.
Right.
There is that too, yeah, just like there is with any other,
Miracle drug.
right?
Well, I mean, THC has been used for centuries in cultures all over the world
Absolutely.
to help alleviate migraines, pain, and to help, you know,
And it
expand
was a
consciousness.
legitimate medicine in other cultures in other times.
Right,
And this
yes.
is what we forget, is that, you know, if we can't take a pill and we can't get an injection that fixes you in a couple of days, that anything that mankind used before was like, you know, snake oil.
Right.
That isn't the case. There was medicine and there were doctors centuries ago that cured all kinds of problems. And we've lost a lot of that. And THC and cannabis is one of the things that's still around that we can point to that has wonderful effects used appropriately.
Well, and ironically, it's still around, but we actually made it awful for ourselves because we took it out of the equation when we could have put it back into the equation.
Yes.
And the reason it got taken out of the equation was because it was a cultural stigma.
It was a cultural stigma.
You know, a lot of the influx of Mexicans into the country and that kind of thing, they started saying, oh, well, you know, they use it all the time, so it must be bad. And then all of a sudden, it was something that they said, yeah, no, we're not allowing anybody to have it. There was prohibition, which then halted
It was
all
a
of the
political,
beautiful
cultural
benefits
move,
we could have had.
right, back in the 30s.
Yes,
Right?
yeah.
It was driven by political and cultural forces.
Which is where we get the word marijuana from, right?
Yes, and that's why
it's actually a racial slur to use the word marijuana now. It's cannabis or, I mean, weed isn't a bad thing or a pot isn't a bad thing, but marijuana is an actual cultural slur because that's where the word came from.
Yeah, it was used negatively.
Yeah.
Negatively.
They added the H to make it sound more Mexican.
Right.
And so they were, you know, trying to make it that way. They were trying to make it so people would see a stigma.
But make no mistake, because cannabis is a natural product and Big Pharma can't synthesize it,
Well, they can, but
Well,
not
they-
as well, yeah.
you don't get the good
The
stuff.
ones that
So
they're
what
actually
they
FDA
do-
approved are working for people though. I'm not saying that they don't work, because there's two FDA approved synthetically made THC things that are for, I believe they're Alzheimer's, and I'd have to look it up.
And if Big Pharma can make big money on it, then they tend to suppress information.
Absolutely.
We all know that, and it's common knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
Well, or we get diverted to something else.
Right.
exactly.
I mean, basically, there's been a lot of stuff we've been talking about. Is cannabis good for migraines? Is there pros and cons to it? Yes, absolutely. There's pros and cons to what kind of migraine you may have or headache you may have. Cluster headaches, migraines, general tension headaches. And then there's hormonal headaches. And
Those
again,
are the worst.
Don't
How would
even
you
go
know?
down that
yes, you will be kicked out very fast. Two estrogen, you know,
All right,
correlates one
carry on,
testosterone. So my point is there is lots of different migraines and lots of different headaches that are possible to be helped by this, but it would be different strains, different amounts of THC and CBD and all of the terpenes, et cetera, that you would have to look at to be perfect for you. And we want to help with all that stuff. And yes, there's pros and cons, and it's been around for a long time. If you have, you know, if you want to try it, talk to your doctor, see if they can help you, and maybe you can have the success story that he has, or that we all have. I can't guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, but hopefully
Because
you can
we're
find
not
something that
doctors
works.
and lawyers.
Because we know a lot of people and have a lot of anecdotal evidence stating that you know, I mean, this stuff works for that, guys. And I know it's a little scary at first when you haven't used it before. The stigma and everything is there. But yeah, it's definitely.
So we've
worthwhile.
talked about we've hit on a lot of different subtopics here that real
We
quickly.
have. There's a bit of a lot of info.
So we'll dig a little deeper in future episodes
So
on.
you're shutting me down now.
I am shutting you down, yeah. We're
Yeah.
wrapping this up, right?
We're gonna
So,
do it together.
right?
Yeah, but I had so much more to say.
No, right? He always has so much more to say, right? We'll go a little deeper in future
Oh,
episodes.
and
on-
THC, actually THC will help with your patience.
You better have
Yes.
some now. Both of them.
That's funny. If you have any questions or comments, please,
Positive comments, the negative ones I delete.
You do.
please leave them below, right? And we'll get back to you.
We
if
would love to
can.
answer anything.
And we'll see you in
Well,
another
maybe they'll answer
episode.
the ones I delete. I can't be bothered.
And cut.